Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and the iPhone 16 Plus and the iPhone 16 Pro Max this year have a lot of similarities, but there's definitely some differences. I thought we'd go over all of the differences between both of them, including the camera, how they operate, speed, and much more to help you decide which would be best for you. Now, the iPhone 16 Plus comes in at the same price as last year, $899, goes up to $1,199, and has the option of 128, 256, or 512 gigabytes of storage. With the iPhone 16 Pro Max, we have $1,199 up to $1,599. Starts at 256 gigabytes. You've got a 512 gigabyte option and 1 terabyte. Now this year, Apple actually made the colors on the new iPhone 16 and 16 Plus models much nicer and more vibrant. This is the all-new ultramarine color. We also have teal, pink, white, and black. Desert Titanium on the 16 Pro Max, which I'm holding here, actually replaces blue, and then Apple kept natural titanium, black, and white. Now, the build this year is similar to what we had last year. With the 16 and 16 Plus, we actually have an aluminum frame with glass front and back. With the 16 Pro models, we actually have a titanium frame, again with glass front and back. And this glass is actually Apple's new version of ceramic shield, so that's something that should be maybe a little bit more durable, but time will tell as far as that goes. Now, as far as the overall size, well, the 16 Plus maintains its size basically that we had last year, or very similar anyway. It's slightly shorter than the 16 Pro Max, and it's actually about the same width. However, the overall thinness is definitely noticeable once you pick them up, as the 16 Plus is a little bit thinner as well. So it has a little bit nicer feel in the hand, but that comes with some compromises as well. Around the outside edge, this year we gain camera control on both of them. So we don't have a compromise there with the 16 Plus versus the 16 Pro Max. So we have our power sleep wake button and then our camera controls. On the top, nothing really different here. We just have antenna lines. And then on the other side, we actually have our action button, again on both of them, and our volume up and down. And on the bottom, while they look the same as far as the overall layout with the speakers and microphone, USB-C is actually different speeds based on the device. The 16 Plus still only has USB 2.0 speeds, or the 16 Pro Max actually has USB 3 speeds. So maybe if you're recording in ProRes, it's easier to offload that footage as it's much faster to do so. When it comes to the overall weight, well, there's definitely a difference there, having an aluminum build versus a titanium build. So what we have is with the 16 Plus, we have 7.03 ounces or 199 grams, with the 16 Pro Max coming in at 7.99 ounces or 227 grams. Of course, the displays are very similar, but also different as far as the overall size. With the iPhone 16 Plus, it comes in at 6.7 inches or 2,796 by 1,290 at 460 pixels per inch. We don't have ProMotion, we don't have always on displays, but they do go down to 1 nit on both of them. With the 16 Pro Max, this is now a 6.9-inch display, 2,868 by 1,320, again at 460 pixels per inch. So very similar as far as the displays and their overall brightness, going up to 2,000 nits and down to 1 nit, but the overall size is different, and you can actually see the size difference in the bezels here as well. The 16 Plus on the left with the 16 Pro Max on the right definitely has a different bezel size. It's minimal, but it's definitely noticeable. When it comes to the overall battery and charging, well, they're very similar this year. However, we have significantly better battery life in the Pro Max. The iPhone 16 Plus has a 4,674 milliamp hour battery, which Apple says is good for 27 hours of video playback, where the 16 Pro Max has a 4,685 milliamp hour battery, where Apple says is good up to 33 hours of playback. But overall battery life is significantly different between both of them. The Pro Max this year definitely is the battery champion between both of them, giving at least 1 to 4 hours more battery life just with regular use. So definitely a difference here where it was a little bit the other way the previous years. Now, with the overall charging speed this year, many people thought we'd have 45-watt fast charging. Unless that's something Apple's unlocking later in the year with a software update, it seems like we've only got up to about 28 watts or so when you're charging this, just like we did in previous years. So if you're using a 30-watt adapter, you'll get the best speeds. Even if you use a 100-watt adapter from a MacBook, you're still going to get about 28 watts. Apple will limit the speed to save the battery. However, this year they did up the overall charge speed with wireless charging with with MagSafe adapters, specifically the braided cable version. It's actually a little bit thinner, so you would have to purchase a new version and then use it with the 30-watt charger. With this combined with the new iPhone, you can get up to 25 watts fast charging via wireless. However, it seems to only stay that fast, maybe between 30 and 50%, and then it slows down. So it does give you a little bit of an advantage. There are heat sensors to sort of take care of that and maintain the battery, but it is something that's a little bit new on both phones this year. It doesn't seem to make that big of a difference, so I wouldn't run out and buy one of these if you already have a MagSafe plug or a MagSafe charger. When it comes to the overall speed and performance of both devices, they're very similar in the sense that they both have a new processor. The iPhone 16 Plus gets the A18, where the iPhone 16 Pro Max actually gets the A18 Pro. So both of them are available for Apple Intelligence. They both have 8 gigs of RAM, and you can see that in Geekbench here. We'll take a look at the Geekbench scores a little bit later, but you'll see they're both clocked at 4.04 gigahertz, and then both have about 7.5 gigabytes or 8 gigs of RAM. So they both have similar capabilities that way. There's just slight differences with the neural engine, but they both support Apple Intelligence. So you'll be able to get that thanks to the bump in RAM and update in the processor. If we open up some simple programs, maybe we'll open up music that was already loaded. We can just simply scroll through. It's going to be fast. If maybe we want to go into the camera, you'll see they both open quickly. In fact, the 16 Plus opened faster that time as far as the display. You'll see again, and we're on the same version of iOS, so very similar experiences there. And if maybe we open up this weather app, go back in, although they're not matching, but we'll go back out. Then if maybe we go into something a little bit more intensive, not super intensive, but a little bit more. So let me put this down and we'll open up Minecraft and just see how long it takes to load. So give it just a second here. It's loading and we're already in on the 16 Plus. So if we go in and press play, we'll go to create new world, then we'll create again. And now it's creating the world. So this gives you an idea of what they're capable of. They should be very, very similar here. Similar frame rates. And since this is a non-ProMotion display, it's still going to be at 60 hertz when you're actually playing a game. Nothing different there, but you'll see there was a slight difference as far as the overall speed of loading the world on the Pro phone. So I wouldn't really expect much of a difference here. Fast frame rates, regular usage. And if we maybe go to iMovie and export a video, let's try that out. In iMovie, I have the same exact video here. In fact, I airdropped it from one to the other and then modified the title here so it would have to reprocess this. So let's go ahead and export this and just see how long it takes. So we'll tap done. Both are set for 4K in HDR. So I'm using another phone as a stopwatch. Let's go ahead and export the video and see how long it takes. So we'll give it a moment to start up, and probably it will take a couple minutes. Now everything completed, and the 16 Pro Max was significantly faster at around 1 minute and 37 seconds, where we're closer to about 3 minutes with the 16 Plus. I've noticed this in different tests I've run. The 16 Pro and Pro Max seem to be much faster with exporting video. Now, as far as the Geekbench scores, let's take a look at that. As you'll see that they're actually fairly similar. So if we go into that, go into Geekbench, and I ran that right before this video, you'll see here that we have 3,417 for single core on the 16 Plus versus 3,534. With multi-core, 8,139 on the 16 Plus versus 8,574. So it's definitely a little bit faster with some of the overall processing, and definitely when you're exporting video. So if you wanted to record video on this and then edit it and then export it, you're going to have a better result with the 16 Pro Max phone, even though it's a similar processor. They've actually just bumped up the specs probably for an HEVC encoder. But both of them seem fairly similar when it comes to day-to-day tasks, and they both seem to stay fairly cool after exporting the video, opening the game earlier. Let's take a look with the thermal camera. And with the 16 Pro Max, we're right at about 26.5 degrees Celsius in the hottest point. And on the 16 Plus, we're right about 27.4 degrees in the hottest point. So very similar, but I think the 16 Pro phones seem to manage thermals a little bit better this time around. And that makes sense as it's actually got a little bit of a graphite covering on it or a different style battery that maybe helps dissipate some of the heat. So Apple's doing a good job here, but there's no vapor chamber yet like some other phones have. So maybe we'll see that in future versions. Now, the 5G modems are very similar in both. We both have a new Qualcomm 5G modem. We also both have Wi-Fi 7 on both devices thanks to the new upgraded chipset. So no compromises between either there with millimeter wave in the United States. Even though they replaced the antenna, they've integrated it into the frame this time around. Now, before we talk about the cameras, let's talk about PWM, or the way they manage overall brightness. Both phones utilize PWM at about 240 Hz from different measurements online, and typically you can see this at about 240 frames per second using slow motion. So I'm recording this with an iPhone 14 Pro Max to show you what it looks like, and at 240 frames per second you actually can see that the 16 Plus has much lower rates of PWM than the 16 Pro Max. So it may bother your eyes more using the 16 Plus. Now, I don't have the measurement tool to give you the exact rate it's running at, but it's low enough that it may bother your eyes if you're sensitive to it. I've been using the 16 Pro Max since it released, and it hasn't bothered my eyes at all. However, if you're very sensitive to the overall flickering of the display, it could cause nausea or maybe cause you to get headaches or just cause a lot of eye strain. Thankfully, this phone doesn't seem to do that to me, but the 16 Plus may, as it's at a seemingly lower rate at the same brightness setting. Now, when it comes to the cameras, the front-facing cameras are identical in every way. They're both 12 megapixel sensors with f1.9 apertures. We just don't have ProRes on the 16 Plus. When it comes to the rear cameras, well, Apple redesigned it this year with the 16 Plus, putting them sort of in a line. So when you're using this horizontally, you can actually record spatial video. So that's something that just makes it easier for that. But when it comes to the cameras, the 16 Plus actually has a 48 megapixel fusion camera, f1.6 aperture, and an ultra-wide 12 megapixel f2.2. We don't have a telephoto zoom lens, no night mode portraits, and no Apple ProRAW or ProRes video. Also no 4K 120. On the 16 Pro Max, we have the 48 megapixel fusion camera again, f1.78, an ultra wide that's 48 megapixels this time around, f2.2 with autofocus, and a telephoto 12 megapixel f2.8 with 5 times optical zoom. We can take spatial photos and videos, as well as we have an option for tone for a look you prefer. And that's something we get on both of them. So there's no compromises here. So if we press the camera capture, it opens up on both of them, press it a little bit, and then we can sort of zoom in if we want to while we're zooming, sliding back and forth, double press to go into a different menu. If we want to take a photo, we can snap a photo like this, go into it, and then if we want to edit, we'll go into edit here, and then we have the option for styles. So we can adjust the tone or whatever looks best to us, maybe bring in some more shadows. This is on both phones, and there's no compromise between either of them. I personally don't find the camera capture option very useful other than just quickly opening the overall camera. That's something you could do with the action button before, but that's just something some people are either going to love, but I don't really find it as something that I use a lot, as when I take a photo with it, it shakes the phone and I typically get a blurry photo. But I do find it useful for zooming in some cases, and maybe in the future it's going to have some updates where it's a little bit better that way. Now let's go ahead and take a look at overall comparisons and see how they actually compare when you're using them outside with photos, videos, night mode, and more. This is the forward-facing camera on the iPhone 16 Plus and the iPhone 16 Pro Max. It gives you an idea of what it looks like, although they should be identical in every way. However, the microphones are slightly different this year. While we still have the 4 different modes on both phones, we actually only have a couple microphones on the iPhone 16 Plus, where we have 4 microphones on the 16 Pro Max. So here's the regular mode in standard, so 16 Pro Max, and here's the 16 Plus in standard mode. It's going to pick up some ambient sound, and I actually like the sound quite a bit. The next one is in-frame, again on the 16 Plus, and if we switch to in-frame on the 16 Pro Max, again, it's a little bit more personal, gets rid of the background noise. And then we have studio mode, again on the 16 Pro Max, so this is what it sounds like, more like I'm in a studio. And then on the 16 Plus, again, making it sound like you're in a studio. The final one is cinematic mode, again bringing in some ambient noise, but not quite as much as studio mode. So on the 16 Pro Max, it actually sounds pretty good. I prefer the studio mode or the standard mode, but let me know which one you think sounds best and looks best in the comments below. Now, other than the cameras, let's take a look at the speakers. Some people thought that the 16 Pro Max sounded significantly better than the 15 Pro Max. So let's go ahead and play some royalty-free music and see how they sound. So here's the 16 Plus first. Here's the 16 Pro Max. Both sound very similar. They both go very loud, both of them around 84 decibels or so. And the 16 Pro Max, at least to me, sounds like it may have a little bit more bass, but the overall clarity is very, very similar. Good stereo sound and decent clarity as long as you're not at the highest volumes. When it comes to the IP ratings, they're both identical in every way. IP68, 6 meters for 30 minutes. And between anything else, well, they're basically the same other than what I've already mentioned. So both great experiences as far as iOS. However, iOS 18 has been a little bit buggy, just like every new release, and I expect it to get much better over time. In general, I think Apple Intelligence will add a lot of nice features to it, and it will be a nicer experience as long as it's available, but it'll eventually be available for both phones in most regions around the world. Now, if you're wondering which one you should pick up, whether it's the 16 Plus or 16 Pro Max, well, it really comes down to really just a couple factors. Is battery the most important thing, or is ProMotion with 120 Hz displays? In general, I think if you don't care about either one, or you want good battery, but you don't care about the overall display, and you like the new colors this year, and a little bit thinner and lighter phone, go with the 16 Plus. It should have the same support for many years, but if you want the very highest end quality display, 120 Hz, that super smoothness, and then of course the best battery life, the 16 Pro Max offers all of that. The same is true with the camera. If you find that you actually use the telephoto zoom lens a lot, you'll want to consider the Pro or Pro Max. But both phones are really nice, but the 16 Pro Max definitely feels much bigger when you're actually holding on to it, given the extra weight and the overall size. The 16 Plus feels a little bit nicer, maybe softer in the hands. I'm not sure if that's due to a texture difference, but both are very nice phones. So I wouldn't have a problem with either one as long as you don't care about ProMotion, but in general, I think they're both decent. However, I would like to see Apple add the option for ProMotion on the 16 Plus. So hopefully that helped you decide which one would be best for you. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below if you upgraded this year or if you're planning to upgrade. Which one did you pick? And if you did pick one of these, let me know what color you picked up as well. Of course, I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.